Hi everybody. So I think the thing that's going to sort of overarch this video is this idea that within the United Kingdom in the last few decades, and probably a lot wider the United Kingdom, attitudes and opinions as to what constitutes not being racist as a non-racist approach seem to have changed out of all recognition, such as the sort of approach that we thought was okay now turns out to be racist. And we're doing things that probably back in the day we would have regarded as being racist. And it's a situation that we all have to get our heads around, because these aren't changes that are coming, these are changes that have come. Because it seems that a series of British comedies have been scrapped from a series of online streaming services because of their racist material, apparently, because of accusations of purported blackface. And those comedies include Bo Selector, The League of Gentlemen and Little Britain, and they have gone from services such as the Channel 4 Media Player, BBC iPlayer, Netflix, and something called BritBox, which I wasn't familiar with. I would have assumed that was some kind of amateur porn video, but it turns out is a kind of UK equivalent of Netflix. So that's what I want to talk about, and the sort of changes that underpin that. But there is an elephant in the room, and I mentioned this the other day. I made a sort of a video that wasn't on my Patreon, but a little video because I felt I had to deal with it, because the video, in comparison, the issues in this video are small beer in some ways to this bigger issue that's going on at the moment, this Black Lives Matter, George Floyd's death issue, these huge BLM protests in the United States and these protests in the UK, which I kind of internally think of as foreign lives matter, but only when they're American lives, because it seems that we don't give a shit about it if it occurs in any lesser country, you know, and I say that ironically. So I talked about that in that other video. I wanted to cover that first so I could move on to this. Okay, so we have this situation now where what has effectively happened is that these different streaming services have took this material off there. It's just not acceptable anymore to show some of this material, and we will discuss that. But also a series of comedians have made apologies and comments on that. And it's absolutely within their right to apologise for anything that they've done, right? I don't take that away from them. But I think sometimes when people make an apology, it's useful to explore why that apology was made, and if we're happy with the sort of underlying sentiments that have led to that apology being made. So first off, let me talk about the show Bo Selector, because maybe one of the things that kicked this off was the guy Lee Francis, who this was his show, and he made the following apology with regards to his material. Hi, my name is Lee Francis and I play a character called Keith Lemon on television. Back in 2002 I did a show called Bo Selector and portrayed many black people. Back then I didn't think anything about it. People didn't say anything. I'm not going to blame it on other people. I've been talking to some people and I didn't realise how offensive it was back then, and I just want to apologise. I want to say sorry for any upset I caused, whether I was Michael Jackson, Craig David, Trisha Goddard, all people that I'm a big fan of. I guess we're all on a learning journey. Now, I know that this is a show that is probably not well known outside of the UK. Lee Francis played this character. It was a wonderful comedy show, I found at the time. It's one of the few comedy shows I've watched where I regularly was laughing to the point where your sides start to hurt. And he played a show where he wore these grotesque rubber faces of different celebrities and misportrayed them in sort of wild ways. And two of his most popular characters were black characters, and that was Michael Jackson and Craig David, and he portrayed them in ways which were quite unlike Michael Jackson and Craig David. Craig David had a kestrel on his shoulder and had a broad Yorkshire accent, neither of which he has, and Michael Jackson was a very sweary version of Michael Jackson. Let me show you a clip of those so you'll get a kind of idea of what I'm talking about.
Oh, go bollocks, Jonesy. It's not my fault it went in your mouth. Proper bellender, tell the Rito. Craig David here, and welcome to Behind the Scenes of my UK tour. Had a bit of an accident last night. piss bed again. And 'cause I sleep on top bunk, it dribbled down and went on my guitar player's face. So tonight, I'm staying in a hotel. You what, Kez? Aye, I'm sure they've got a porn channel. Proper kinky bitch, I tell thee. Oh. This is life in Kez, eh? Aye. What the bastard in hell is that? I'm not having that all night, Kez. I won't have it. I won't.
Check my man fares on my scooty. Hee, Marty, take me.
Michael bloody Jackson going up and down on a scooter. I know, Kez. Never heard of it, do you? I tell you what, I think the man's a genius, but I won't have that moonwalking bastard spoiling our fun. Eh? Don't you worry, I'll put a stop to it. Next week on my video diary, I meet Sarah Cox as I'm promoting me tour.
It's UK Gary Sensation, Craig David!
You're smacking me there, love.
OK, let's go to caller number 1.
So that hopefully gives you a little feel of what that comedy was all about. And he played a bewildering array of characters, and they were all celebrities. He wouldn't just play a random black person, white person, Asian person. The people that he played were all celebrities. And it is probably true that in terms of his show, these were two of the most well-loved characters within that show. And then there is Little Britain, which was a comedy which had, I think, some appeal outside of the United Kingdom. And the writers and the stars of that show were two comedians, Matt Lucas and David Walliams, and they played a series of characters within that show. And they played male characters, they played female characters, they played white characters, black characters, South Asian characters, East Asian characters within that show. A very diverse sort of cast, all played by those two people. And this is what they have had to say. Little Britain, Matt Lucas and David Walliams, very sorry for Blackface. Matt Lucas and David Walliams have apologised for playing characters of different ethnic backgrounds in their sketch show Little Britain. The series used blackface makeup in some sketches. Earlier this week it was removed from BBC iPlayer, Netflix and BritBox after objections resurfaced. The pair said they regret that we played characters of other races. Once again, we want to make it clear that it was wrong and we are very sorry, they said in their statement. In 2017, Lucas said, if I could go back and do Little Britain again, I wouldn't make those jokes about transvestites. I wouldn't play black characters. And then I've also got this to read for you, which was back in 2017, Matt Lucas talking on the same subject. Society has moved on a lot since then and my own views have evolved. There was no bad intent there. The only thing you could accuse us of was greed. We just wanted to show off about what a diverse bunch of people we could play. Lucas, who appeared alongside David Walliams in the show, said he now thought it was lazy for white people to get a laugh just by playing black characters. In an interview in 2010, Lucas, who is gay, the reference there is because he'd played gay characters and they mentioned that earlier on, said he never aimed to bring comedy out of racial characteristics and was simply playing a character who happens to be a different colour. Interestingly enough, unlike Bo Selector, where maybe some of the black characters that Lee Francis portrayed were the most popular and the most successful, it was the other way around with Little Britain. Most of the most loved, most successful characters were those that were exaggerated, grotesque characterizations of white people within that particular show.
This boot camp is home to Vicky Pollard, a member of Britain's thriving underclass. Of course, in America, she will be considered aristocracy.
That's when I started messing around with drugs and stealing, and then I'd steal to feed the drug habit, and I realized now I was just in a lot of pain. And I think being here at camp has really helped me understand that.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Lindsay. It's very moving. Vicky.
What?
Tell us a bit about your home life.
You, but, you, but, you, but, Yeah, because I live at home with Shelley, and she could be my mum, but she might be my sister, I'm not sure. Maybe she's both. Anyway, she's like well harsh, because once, right, she grounded me for 15 minutes, and it was so unfair, because all I did, right, was go down Baskin Robbins, because Denise Welby got a Saturday job there, and I made her give me all the money out the till and shat in the mint choc chip.
I think I got some of that. And what about school?
Oh yeah, I went there once, it was all right.
You went there once?
Yeah. I've done math, or similar nothing, histography, biometry, and... Oh, what's that one where they're all talking some weird language in that and you can't really understand it?
French?
No, English.
Right.
But that's kind of where we're at. I've tried to give most of that without giving my sort of interpretation or opinions on that, and I want to move on to that now in the video. I think it's fair to say, if we're trying to wrap our heads around this, that what being non-racist has changed. It's evolved over the last few decades, and that's how these comedies have kind of fallen foul of this. It used to mean not being racist, sort of the right thing to do, used to mean treating everybody the same. We'd look back in the past where people from ethnic minority groups within majority white countries were treated in a different way. They were othered. They were lessened. They were treated in those ways. And we tried to move beyond that. And the way that we tried to move beyond that was to just treat everybody the same. Right. That was the goal of that. And that seems to have gone now. In fact, so much so, that's deemed so unacceptable now that not only can comedians not do that, but they're feeling the need to apologise for ever having held those positions in the past. And that isn't the position that we're heading towards. That is the position that we are at now. We're looking back at these comedies where what they tried to do in actual fact, in the name of diversity and treating everybody the same, was to treat everybody the same. And it turns out that this was a terrible racist thing that they were doing, and that somehow they should have done something different, though it's never said exactly what they should have done, because I don't think anybody knows. It's this kind of double bind situation that I'll talk about a little bit later. But I think it's interesting to think, because what we're talking about, fundamental to this, is accusations of blackface and what that means, and how what that means has kind of changed into a way in which it's now incorporating things which I don't think it was ever meant to incorporate. I think most of us have some kind of a grasp as to what was at stake here and what was wrong with it, and the things that was wrong with it, which makes that a bad accusation to make. And I think there were really two issues at play here. The lesser of the two issues I'll mention first, just to get it out the way, which was that one of the problems with blackface, and this didn't just include people from sub-Saharan African origins being represented, but people who were South Asian and East Asian as well, particularly in the United Kingdom with its Commonwealth links, was that it meant that people from those groups were denied acting roles, were denied opportunities within the creative industries, because what was happening quite grotesquely is that when a production wanted somebody to play a black role, or to play, particularly in the United Kingdom, a South Asian role, they would get a white actor and get them to brown their face up to play the role. Now, there maybe was a time, to cut a little bit of slack here, where you could see some justification in that back in the 40s or 50s, where maybe there were not that many people. You wanted an actor to play that role, but there weren't those actors in the UK. You could kind of see it, but then the situation moved on from that to where there was a substantial population, including actors from those ethnic groups, and yet we were still choosing a white person to sort of brown themselves up to play that role, rather than choosing an actor from the appropriate ethnic group. It's kind of bizarre. It's like wanting a female lead and getting a guy to play that female lead instead. You know, it just doesn't make any sense, and you can understand that. But that was maybe the minor issue, really, particularly with regard to black people and their representations. It was about other things. It was about othering. It was about maintaining segregation. It was about grotesque and degrading stereotypes, really. It was about portraying black people in a way in which their what was perceived as their ethnic and racial characteristics were exaggerated and framed in a negative context, and so you can understand everything that was wrong with that. And it was also in a context where you were portraying generic black man or generic black woman. It wasn't about portraying specific black celebrities in the same way that you would portray a white person. In many ways, and this is the point of objection that I have, it was the exact diametric opposite of what we are talking about here. These are situations where these people, such as Matt Lucas, David Walliams and Lee Francis, have blacked themselves up as a means of increasing diversity, as a means of representing these people in the same way, in terms of trying to show the diversity and treat everybody the same. It's the exact opposite of the objections that people had with blackface. Indeed, if what they were doing is all that blackface was, then we wouldn't have any objection to it to begin with, because it would actually have been a rather marvellous thing to do. So it seems a bit strange to me that it's been portrayed. It seems as if we've lost all nuance here. What we've done is we've said these things were bad, these things we called blackface. Now we're going to call blackface carte blanche whenever a white person puts on brown or dark makeup and attempts to be somebody from another ethnicity. Ergo, because both these two different things we're going to call blackface, they must both be equally bad, which is moronic in the extreme. The League of Gentlemen I haven't mentioned yet. That has been banned from Netflix. They had a character on there. This is the most bizarre banning of the lot, called Papa Lazarou, and that is the controversial character that has had it banned. Pretty much other than that character, the whole show was an absolute whitewashed thing. It was set in a sort of rural Yorkshire town where everybody's white, but Papa Lazarou wore blackface. But that was his character, right? That was his character, which was that he was a bizarre gypsy circus owner whose the animals in the circus, because it's a very twisted and weird comedy, were made out of humans. And he wore blackface. In fact, you actually see him remove the blackface in one of the sketches to show that he's a white person who just wears blackface as part of this bizarre character. So that was actually part of his character. So you can't even now represent somebody wearing blackface to parody somebody wearing blackface. Even that's inappropriate now. That's how far down the well we've got. So that's where we're at. And to me, I have to say, it feels like we're going backwards. It feels like we're sliding. This doesn't feel like a situation that is less racist or more non-racist than the situation we had before. It seems like we're resurrecting barriers of segregation again. We're trying to recreate a situation where you will be treated differently based upon your ethnicity. And in a country such as the United States, we're effectively going to segregate comedy off in a way in which is acknowledging race and ethnicity and treating them differently in a way which we try to get away from. And when you think about it, right, I think it's almost leading us into a kind of impossible situation. And to try and explain what I mean, let's take the example of Little Britain. Bear in mind what Matt Lucas said, which was that if he could have made that again, he wouldn't include any black characters. And he also means he wouldn't include any South Asian or East Asian characters. This is to give you an example, to give you an understanding of what Little Britain was about. Let me read from Wikipedia. The programme consists of a series of sketches involving exaggerated parodies of British people from across walks of life. Each sketch was introduced by a voice-over narration suggesting that the programme was a guide aimed at non-British people to British society. So it was a comedy. It was a parody. The characters were exaggerated and in many cases grotesque, but it attempted to show the diversity. It was parodying Welsh people, Scottish people, English people, Northern Irish people. It was parodying men. It was parodying women. It was parodying the chavs, the sort of lowest echelons of society, and it was also parodying the upper echelons of society, the upper classes. It was parodying the middle classes. It was attempting to show the diversity. Think what we're talking about here, what Matt Lucas is saying. The show that he would have made would have been whitewashed. It would have represented a United Kingdom where everybody is white, or at least all the funny people, all the important people, all the people that David Walliams and Matt Lucas were playing, all the main characters, all the major players, all the people that we should be interested in are white people. How well do you think that would have gone down at the time? I don't think they'd have been given an apology for it now. They'd have been giving an apology for it back when the show was made, because the show that attempted to show the diversity of characters and eccentrics within the United Kingdom would have been entirely full of white characters. I can't give you an answer to this, because it seems to me that we've contrived a situation now where you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If you make a show like this and every character is a white character, as white comedians, because unfortunately for David Walliams and Matt Lucas, they are cursed with the fact of white skin, which they cannot do anything about, their intrinsic characteristics, and so by these rules they can only play white characters. And so as a pair of comedians making this show, they are hamstrung by that. They are bound into that. There is nothing that they can do about that. So that would be the only show that they could make in the form in which they made it. And so what is the answer here? They would be damned if they do and damned if they don't. That isn't where we're heading. YouTube videos like this usually talk about where we're heading if we don't do something. That isn't where we're heading. That is where we are at. That is the situation right now. And so I try and get my head around this and think that where does it lead? And of course my initial thoughts is this, well, so they if that show was made today, a David Walliams and a Matt Lucas would just include white characters, and then they'd be accused of being racist for only portraying white characters. But I think that generally speaking, comedians and certainly the producers and the directors and the commissioners of these shows are more intelligent than that, and they can see the pitfalls of that. But unfortunately it means that they're kind of damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. They're racist if they only portray white characters, and they're racist if they portray non-white characters. So regrettably, I think there's a situation where you have these really funny comedies that just won't get made anymore because they can't make them. The people who want to make them actually do not have the intrinsic characteristics that allows them to make it within the constraints that we're placing upon society. Now, it seems we've got this kind of schizophrenic idea of what is being non-racist that just doesn't fit together, where there's no actual space in which people like that can occupy and satisfy all the conditions that we are setting. And there is another issue as well, which is that effectively what it's showing is we're showing a greater diversity, and we're showing everybody's getting represented. Ethnic minorities are getting represented, and their cultures are getting represented. And what you are doing every time that you do this, every time you talk about cultural appropriation in these kinds of contexts as well, is that you actually limit the amount of exposure that the non-incumbent cultures receive. Right, so there are already minority cultures. 83% of the UK population are white British. So you've got this 17%, but if the 83% can't represent that 17% because it's either blackface or cultural appropriation, you can see the issue here, especially when the 17% is, of course, you couldn't stop them from representing the mainstream culture because that's incorporated into their culture as well. So what you have is a situation where perversely, in the name of diversity, you're actually doing the exact opposite. You're guaranteeing a situation where the mainstream culture and the main ethnicity within the population is the only thing that it's very, very easy to represent. And you're making a situation, you're contriving a situation where it actually becomes harder to try and uplift those other cultures. It seems a very, very perverse set of circumstances to me, and very, very badly thought out, and all because these ideas of blackface and cultural appropriation, which have very legitimate roots, are being entirely misportrayed, entirely misapplied in these circumstances. That is what I think. I'm interested to know what you think. I'm also interested, if you're not subscribed, for you to hit that button. Please, if you really like my work, I have a Patreon and a PayPal recurring payments and all that kind of jazz. I hope you found this video interesting. So I'm watching this back as I edited it, and I realise I may have just culturally appropriated jazz. So I'd like to scrap what I said that and change it for all that traditional English folk music. Interested to know what you think in the footnote, in the comments section below the footnotes. Okay, there'll be some links in the footnotes. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.